a minute. What I want you to be able to do is trace the path of light through the eye. Okay? And I'll kind of give you a heads up on that. Light comes into our eye. The first structure that it hits, you know what it is?
Retina.
Well, that's in the back of the eye. That's where your nerves are. The first structure that it hits is the cornea. This is this transparent membrane that covers the front part of our eye. It's actually an extension of the sclera, which is the white part of our eye, but it's transparent and covers the front portion of the colored portion of our eye, the iris. Okay? And it does not have a blood supply. So the cornea is avascular. Okay, now think about that. If it did have a blood supply, we would see the world red. Be a rosy world out there. This is why corneas are so valuable, as when you donate organs, you sign your name on your license that you're going to be an organ donor, and they find out, one of the first people to get there is the eye bank, because they want to harvest your corneas, because they don't have a blood supply, therefore there's no antigens in there for somebody else's body to reject. You can just implant the cornea on somebody else and improve their vision. So after it hits the cornea, it goes into an area of the eye called the anterior chamber. And that anterior chamber is filled with a fluid called aqueous humor. Okay? It's also important to remember that light, when it passes from one medium to another, whatever those medium are, it gets refracted or bent slightly. Okay? Ever so slightly, it gets bent. Here's an example that might help you to understand that. If you sit on the edge of a pool and you stick your feet in the water and you look down, the position that you perceive your feet to be in is not the position that they're in, because the light, when it hits the water, is bent. And then when the light bounces off your feet, your feet are here, the light comes down, it gets bent, bounces off, so that your feet actually look like they're over here, and they're here. When light passes between any two medium, whether it be air, water, some sort of glass, anything like that, it gets bent, refracted. Okay? Now, it passes through the cornea, passes through the anterior chamber, where this aqueous humor is, and it passes through a hole in your iris. The iris is the colored portion of your eye, okay? So you have this hole here. Well, here's your iris, which is actually two muscles, and it passes through that hole called the pupil. People, say, the pupil is not a structure. It's just a hole. It's a void in between this muscle called the iris. That muscle has pigment in it, and that's what gives your eye color.
So it passes through the pupil and the iris?
The pupil of the iris, yes. And it goes through there, and then it strikes a structure called the lens. Okay? And it gets bent again. And what the lens does is takes all of these light waves that come in at all angles, they get bent here, and when they pass through here, they get bent, and you have these light waves that come through, and they get bent. These light waves come in and they get bent. And what the lens does is it bends the light, it refracts the light, and focuses it on an area in the back of your eye, on the retina, called the, let's trace the path first, and I'll tell you about that. Cornea, anterior chamber, passes through the aqueous humor, through the pupil, passes through the lens, into the posterior chamber, which is filled with a fluid called the vitreous humor. Now, a difference between aqueous humor and vitreous humor. One is the consistency. The aqueous humor is more like water. The vitreous humor is more like a really thin jello. Okay? Another difference is the aqueous humor we continuously produce. The vitreous humor, by the time we're an adult, that's all we're going to get. So if you suffer an injury to the globe where you leak vitreous humor, you're going to have to, they make synthetic vitreous now, but prior to that, you're kind of screwed. What that vitreous humor does is it's a fluid, like a real thin jello kind of fluid. It helps the globe to maintain its shape, and it helps to keep the retina pressed against the posterior part of the globe. The retina is nervous tissue. Okay? Cornea, anterior chamber, aqueous humor through the pupil, hits the lens, through the vitreous humor, and then it hits the retina. All right? And that's nervous tissue. You have two types of retinal tissue. You have rods and cones. Okay? Thing about cones to remember is they provide for color vision. And they are stimulated by bright light. Rods are stimulated by dim light. Okay, and these are spread out in a layer of nervous tissue on the back of the globe, your eyeball, if you will. Rods they're stimulated, they allow you to see in the dark. Cones provide for color vision, and they also provide for, they're stimulated by bright light, but they're provide for sharpness of vision. Okay? Because there's an area on the back of your retina called the fovea centralis, and this has only cones in it. Okay, it's only cones. And it is your area of sharpest visual acuity. Okay, that's why all the light that comes in from all these various angles is being directed toward and focused on this fovea centralis, so that you can see sharply. All right? You've heard of a detached retina, right? Well, what happens is, it literally, here's your eyeball, and you have this area of retina on the back, and that vitreous, remember, is in the posterior chamber and helps to keep that retina pressed against the back of the bulb. But what happens in a detached retina is that part of that retina gets separated from the posterior portion of the globe, and you're not able to see. The light won't stimulate that part of the retina properly. Remember Sugar Ray Leonard? Lived up in Maryland. He had suffered a detached retina from boxing. So what they can do is they can actually stick a needle in there and put in synthetic vitreous to sort of press the retina back against the bulb. Now there is an area back here where there are no rods and cones, because it's the area where all of the axons, because rods and cones are neurons, they're nerve cells, they're stimulated by light, and all those axons collect together to form the optic nerve. All right, so they all collect up here, and so there's no vision there. And you may have heard this referred to as everybody has a blind spot. You can kind of, if you do your hand like that, you can find where your blind spot is. You can't see because there's no retina there, because all of these axons come together and then they exit the globe. So that's your optic nerve. Okay. be able to trace the path of light. Not that hard if you just go through it once or twice. Know that light gets bent or refracted when it passes between any two media. And you have this area called the fovea centralis, which is a collection of just cones that provide for sharpness of vision. Now we have different, how long have you been wearing glasses?
Since I was probably 23.
Okay. I'll tell you what my problem was. This lens that we have in our youth, it has the ability, it's sort of elastic. It has the ability to change shape to accommodate near vision. You know, you've had a vision test before, right? What's your vision? What do they tell you it is?
Well, 2040.
2040. Well, the first 20 refers to 20 feet, because you take a vision test and you're 20 feet away from the Snellen chart, okay? And then the other is just a relative number, all right? So like they say 20/20 is perfect vision, right? Now, as we get older, all right, so at 20 feet, all the light waves that enter our eye and strike something that's 20 feet away from us, they're all parallel, okay? And so then as the object gets closer, those light waves start to diverge a little bit, just because of the physics of light. And so what our lens does, here's our lens at 20 feet. And then as the object comes closer, our lens will bend. It'll increase its convexity. It'll bow out like that to properly take these light waves and focus them back down on the fovea centralis. Now, as we get older, there's a condition known as presbyopia, which in simple terms is old-sightedness. The lens loses its ability to change its shape and accommodate near vision. That's what happened to me. I didn't have to wear glasses till I was 40, and then it gets progressively worse. And then every so often you've got to change the prescription, because this continues to lose its ability to change shape. And so the prescription you had 5 years ago is not going to refract the light properly enough to focus it on the fovea. Okay, now there's a couple other conditions. Nearsightedness, which is myopia, and then farsightedness, which is hyperopia. And this results usually from different shaped eyeballs. Okay, in other words, some eyeballs, here's the front part of the eye, and then some eyeballs, they're just a little bit shorter than the others. So what happens is the light comes through, it gets bent by the lens, and it gets focused behind the retina instead of on the retina. Okay, these kind of people, these are hyperopia. These are farsighted people. They can see things far away, but they can't see things up close. Nearsighted people, the opposite is true. I believe I'm correct on that, is that their globes are just a little bit elongated. And so when the light comes in and it gets bent, it gets focused in front of the retina. So what do you do to correct these different changes in the globe? You put another lens in front of the cornea to properly refract the light, so that instead of being focused in front of the retina, it's on the retina. Or instead of being focused behind the retina, you get focused on the retina. Now there's another common visual problem called astigmatism. You may have heard of it. And I have a little bit of that as well. Not real bad, at least not yet. And what that is that is an irregularity in the cornea. Okay, so if the cornea is not just the right shape, then obviously it's going to affect how the light is refracted. And so, like people with myopia and hyperopia, you have to put a lens in front of it to correct it. Okay? That's not to say, and you know, you've heard of things called a cataract. Well, a cataract involves the lens. It's just an area of opacity in the lens where it becomes cloudy and the light won't pass through it. So you won't see that. And then one of the primary causes of cataracts is overexposure to ultraviolet light from the sun. You know, wear your sunglasses, especially now. You know, we're being told that the ozone layer is thinning, okay, which means that more ultraviolet light will reach the Earth's surface and can do more damage to your eyes. All right, those are some of the high points. All right, do take a little bit of time, go through the chapter. Those high points will help a lot. Okay, so look those over again, and you can do it on the film. And then if you run into a part or run into a section in the book that's confusing or doesn't make sense, or you don't know what the heck they're talking about, send me a mail or call me. Hopefully, it's going to snow tomorrow, and I won't have to go to work.
It's supposed to start it
It's
tonight.
supposed to start tonight.
Did it? Can you see what the zone is?
Well, we're getting ready to.
So go ahead and turn it off.
Yeah. And then if you'll
Look, here what I'll do, just a second. I'll have this into my computer